welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
I welcome you to the third week in a 6-week series entitled Conflict, Hostility, or Harmony. For you viewers who have been watching our program in the first 2 weeks, know that this is a very, very in-depth study that we've been doing at North Idaho College in our lecture series, and we are very fortunate to have those speakers on our television program. Today our subtopic is conflict in education and also what is going on in those institutions. We are very, very fortunate to have as our guest today Cherry A. McGee Banks from Seattle, Washington. Ms. Banks is the president of Educational Materials and Services Center, which is a research information center for educational curriculum. The center has a nationwide board of advisors. In fact, I even saw a member of the board from England, I believe. Our guest is an educational specialist with the Seattle Public Schools and a staff associate with the Citizens Education Center Northwest. She conducts numerous lectures and workshops addressing the issues of academic achievement of minority students, education in plural societies, and children's literature. Our guest also holds a baccalaureate degree from Michigan State University, a master's degree from Seattle University, and is working at this time on her doctorate at Seattle University. She has co-authored a book entitled Multicultural Education, Issues and Perspectives, and it is published by Alan Bacon. She is also a member of the Board of Trustees and the former chair of the Board of Trustees of Shoreline Community College. It's a very great pleasure having you with us, and we look forward to the interview.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to welcome also to the panel two members to assist in questioning our distinguished guest today. To my immediate left is Janelle Burke, an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Joe Webb, the assistant to the president at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Welcome to our show. It's my understanding that when you addressed the students at North Idaho College as part of the symposium series, that you talked somewhat about the changing demographics and what effect this is having on education. Can you tell us what are the changing demographics? How is education different because of them? What effect are they having on our educational systems?
Well, our nation is experiencing some rather dramatic changes in our demographic makeup. We are currently seeing some of those changes in the schools, and I think that that's where educators will be particularly impacted by some of those changes. For example, by the year 2000, 1/3 of the students in our schools will be students of color. Currently, in the state of California, most of the students who attend school there in the public schools are students of color. And this is rather dramatic because California is our largest state. There are 30 million people there. And the kind of changes that we're seeing in terms of the makeup of our student population means that educators will need to begin to take a look at the procedures that they're using in terms of teaching strategies, the structure of the schools, and various other things that are going to be important for them to address in terms of making those schools effective for a very diverse student population.
Is there also a graying of America so that there are fewer students in proportion to the general population?
That's very true. And what we're seeing is a very differential kind of impact of the graying of America. Most Anglo-Americans are growing older, and we're seeing a very definite decrease in the number of young children between birth and 17 years old in the Anglo population. The number of children in the Hispanic population is growing tremendously, and the number of children in the black population is increasing just slightly, but basically remaining the same. There's also a differential in terms of social class. The number of young people who are born into homes that are middle class and upper class is decreasing also, whereas the number of students who are born into homes that are low income are also increasing. So we're seeing a graying of America, but we're also seeing an increase in students from very different populations within the society.
Joel.
I can understand that that would have profound influence and that we need to deal with it. And one of the things that you spoke about is developing a more caring society so that society in general will face these issues and realize that the future is not going to be the same as the past. How will multicultural literacy aid in that?
I think that it has the tremendous potential of helping us grapple with the reality of our society. It would be wonderful if we could all begin to adapt and to embrace differences in what I refer to as all of the children of this nation, because it's the right thing to do and because we are a caring, humane society. And there are many individuals within our society who are doing that and who will continue to do it. But multicultural education will help our society and members of our society grapple with the need to become more caring and more humane, because if we don't, our own survival, our individual survival, will be impacted. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to isolate pockets of our society and maintain affluence and isolation from some of the issues related to poverty. It's all around us and it will affect all of us. I gave one statistic that indicated that 17 individuals at one point in our history were available to support each retiree in our society. By the year 2000, that will be down to 3 individuals, and by 2020 it will be 2.2 individuals. And so as we look at our own retirement and our own ability to live a satisfying life in our later years, we realize that it's going to be imperative that individuals that we may not necessarily view today as being part of our society will have to step forward and be effective members of our society. Our ability to compete in an interconnected world society will also be affected by our ability to field a group of scientists and a group of engineers who are going to be able to be effective individuals within a technological society. And currently the number of minority students or students of color and the number of women who are going into sciences and into engineering is not at a level where we will be able to continue to compete.
Yes.
So
Well,
multicultural education will assist us in understanding those realities.
It would seem to me that we can't just start at grade 1 or preschool and begin there and take one group of our society upwards. It seems as if we'll have to start injecting more of these aspects of our culture in, and its implications into all grades from kindergarten on up at the same time, which means a great change in curriculum, doesn't it?
Very definitely. And I think that is something that we are seeing occurring in some school districts across the nation. There are a number of school districts that recognize that these issues have to be addressed and are making changes in their K-12 curriculum. They're looking at changes in the social studies, language arts curriculum very definitely, and then there are also some districts that are looking at changes in the sciences and the kinds of things that are going on there. And it is at the K-12 level, all of the students at all grade levels.
As I introduce the program again today, and you've done such an excellent job on our campus today of dealing with our topic for the week, conflict. As we deal with some of the very serious problems that we have in education that you have eloquently presented today, that will create conflict. And I guess I have a two-part, rather involved question. Part one, would you take some time to talk with our audience about some of the real serious problems in the curriculum that we have today, and that it's a very exclusive curriculum, leaving out very vital segments of society. And then when you finish that, I'd like to come back and talk to you a little bit about the kind of conflict that creates and that change and how we deal with that. But would you please identify some of the real serious problems with the curriculum today?
Okay, one of the things that I think we have to be sensitive to is that we do have some fairly significant changes in our society. We are a part now of an interconnected global world society, and we have here in the United States a very diverse multi-ethnic society. The current curriculum that's available for most students throughout the United States is one that has been termed Eurocentric, and it represents the concepts, perspectives, and issues that are presented from a very limited part of the world, a very limited part of our nation. It is not inclusive, and it does not represent the experiences of women to a great extent and of students of color. In order to make that curriculum more realistic in terms of its representation of all of the people of this nation, and also in order to make the curriculum more effective in its ability to motivate and encourage students to achieve in school and therefore be effective members of our society, helping us to enter the 21st century in a very strong position, we have to look at changes. And some of those changes have to do with the content of the curriculum. We need to expand the content so that perspectives and various individuals and information that's covered represents a broader range of individuals. And we can teach various disciplines using a range of content. And so we're going to be able, I think, to very effectively teach reading, teach language arts, teach social studies, but not necessarily teach it in the way that we've taught it before in terms of content. We can broaden that content and include many different ethnic groups and different perspectives. We also need to take a look at the construction of knowledge and the way that we're teaching our students to view information. They need to understand how knowledge is created, and they need to be critical thinkers so that they can understand the information that's being presented to them, not only in the schools, but also by the media, magazines that they read, TV programs that they watch, various parts of society, which tend to reinforce a very limited understanding of the world that we live in. And then we need to take a look at the actual kinds of approaches that we're using in terms of teaching strategies and broaden that so that we are more effectively delivering the curriculum to a broader range of students.
I was so impressed in your presentation that you talked about the canons of education. I think that's very vividly expressive. And as we have to address those canons that have been exclusive to people of color and women's role in history, for example, that's going to be a very difficult challenge. There's going to be a lot of resistance. Could you assist us in talking a little bit about, as we go about that, it has to be done. It's very wrong, and it's very essential that we do that. But how should we do it? How can we make that process go at a rapid rate and at the same time manage the conflict that comes through that process?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, there is a degree of conflict involved. Dr. James A. Banks at the University of Washington has written an excellent article entitled "The Battle Over the Canon," in which he identifies what some of the issues are involved in this whole approach. And one of the things that I think that we have to be very sensitive to is that change, and particularly the kinds of changes that we're talking about in terms of multicultural education and the changes in canon and so forth, will involve different perspectives and will involve very important emotional kinds of identifications for individuals, long-held perspectives, and these will not be given up with ease. Change is not easy for anyone, and particularly change as it relates to things that are so strongly identified with, particularly difficult. And I think that two areas have to be addressed in terms of change, and those two areas are trust and communication. And they actually build on each other and are interrelated. It's very important for people to feel that they have that their point of view is a respected point of view. It may not be one that's agreed with or one that will necessarily hold the day, but that it is recognized and that it is something that has a degree of respect. There also has to be communication in terms of people feeling that their voice is heard, that they have a means of sharing with individuals what their perspectives are, and that the individuals who are in decision-making roles understand their position. And I think if we can build trust and build bridges of communication between groups, we can address some of these challenges that will be involved in restructuring our schools. It will not be easy, but I think that with trust and with communication, we can at least begin that process with as little dysfunctional conflict as possible.
Thank you. Janelle Berg.
I have a three-part question, really. It involves parent involvement. First of all, should parents be involved in the school process, in the educational process, or is that something that should be left to the educational experts? Secondly, how do you feel in regard to parents of students who are minority students? What should be their role in this whole process of change? And third, what should be the role of other parents as they prepare their children to enter into this time when there are going to be more students who are minority students, or there are going to be different curriculums?
That's a very good question. I just recently attended a high school open house. My middle school student is going to be going into high school next year, and the local high school invited parents to the school to talk about the kinds of things that would be going on. And I was rather surprised because out of the speakers that talked to us that night, each one of them made the point over and over again that as parents we would have to be involved in the educational process, that the school could not do everything for our students alone, and that if we wanted our students to receive the best possible education, that we would have to be involved. The school district that my students and children attend are school districts that have very heavy parent involvement, and I think that's not uncommon in most middle class communities. There's traditionally a lot of parent involvement. We, over the years in education, have kind of gone through several phases where we've said parents need to be involved, and then we've said, well, we really don't want a lot of parent involvement. We're going to be teaching things that parents don't understand, and they really can't play a role. I think that we now are at a point in our society where we recognize that the home does play a critical role. And so my answer to you, the first part of your question, is very definitely parents must be involved in the educational process, and I think that if we expect that schools will be able to do an effective job of educating students, we will need to make a role for parents and provide an opportunity for them to participate. As far as minority parents are concerned, I think we need to take a look at the roles that we have for parents to participate in schools. Traditionally, we have had parents come to the schools, and particularly mothers, and work in the schools as a volunteer, drive for field trips, participate in PTA and various things along those lines. The roles for parents in schools will need to change. Most parents today have various responsibilities that require that they're not available during the day. I just read an interesting statistic that said that 6% of the families in our nation now represent father working outside of the home, mother at home with 2 children. That's 6%. And most families today have either 2 working parents or a single parent who's working. So the role of parents in the school as volunteer is probably not going to be a very effective role for parent involvement. We're going to have to be more creative. And I've talked in some of the things that I've written about looking at new ways of involving parents, and I think probably one of the most effective ways is to allow parents to become more knowledgeable about the kinds of things that are going on in the classroom, and then ask their support in their homes to give the teacher the kind of support in terms of structuring the home environment and providing support for students as they try to achieve the kinds of things that they're involved in at home. And I think if we can do that, we will see a very definite broadening of the kinds of people and the diversity of people who are involved in schools. And in terms of your last point, I think we really need to begin to take a look at the diversity of parents. We look at diversity in terms of student population, and we forget that that means that we have a diverse parent population, and that parents are going to have different points of view on educational issues. And as I was talking in response to Tony's question, I think we're going to have to communicate with the home and provide an opportunity for parents to share their perspectives and create an environment where they feel that they are respected and that they are welcome in terms of what is going on in the school, to share their different perspectives and so forth. So I think that that's going to be probably one of the most important areas that we have to grapple with in the future.
Joelle.
Well, it occurs to me in connection with that point, one that I was going to bring up, and that is for parents to share, and for students, especially those just starting out, to begin their educations with a good jump start, you might say. They need to be able to speak the language. And obviously many of our people of color have a minimum amount of English. Now, it's my understanding, and I've seen that young children can pick up language very fast. And of course, parents in many cases are determined to and make an effort. Others don't, because they live in an area where they can use their what we call their major language. But it seems to me that it's going to be necessary for teachers to be perhaps multilingual. It doesn't mean that everyone doesn't realize that English, American English in this country is what will be the major language, and certainly every student will need to learn it. But how are we going to make that not necessarily a transition, but that combination?
I think one of the things that we're seeing in various parts of our nation is that we've already entered an era where a large number of students who are attending school do not speak English as their primary language, and as a result the school has had to respond to that. As you said, the parents often are not necessarily going to speak English, and the student becomes a vehicle of communication between the home and the school, which may be a positive, and it may mean that some of the messages that the school would like to get home don't quite make it. So the school does have to begin to take a look at the way that they are preparing their communications with the home. In the Seattle School District, for instance, there are I believe over 30 different languages spoken by students in the district, and the district has made attempts to prepare communications in various languages. That's just the first effort. As you mentioned, I think having a student body that's diverse means that you do need to have some attention in terms of diversity to the teaching force. And certainly, I think people, as we look at these changing demographics that are occurring, will begin to realize that it's going to be in their interests to speak a different language other than English, that they will have more job opportunities and that they will have much more flexibility in terms of the kinds of things that they can involve themselves in. So having teachers in the building who speak the language of the students, if not every teacher, at least some teachers in the building, would be one means of communicating more effectively.
Do you think we can encourage more people of color to go into education, since now many of our teachers are Anglo-Saxon or whites, and also encourage those who've already had their education to go back and get more of other languages?
I've always believed that education is a very excellent field to go into, and I always encourage young people to consider education as an area to go into. As we increase the number of students of color who are going into higher education, I think we will see an increase in the number of students who are also selecting education as an area that they would like to pursue. we have had a decrease over the last decade in the number of students of color who are entering higher ed, and we are just recently beginning to see an increase. And if we are able to sustain that increase by retaining the students in higher ed until they reach graduation, then I think we will see some changes.
As a board member of the Shoreline Community College, what is your college doing on retention, as I assume you have a problem like most community colleges?
Our community college has targeted recruitment, retention as two of the very important issues that we are addressing. We are attempting to increase the number of minority faculty members because we know that, and there's a lot of data that supports that if you have faculty members of color, that you will also be able to attract students of color. And that it is important for them to see the role models, to have individuals on the campus that have experiences similar to theirs and will be able to relate to them. We are also looking at our curriculum. And right now we have a committee that is attempting to take a look at our core curriculum, and we will be hopefully implementing a new curriculum by the fall, which will include a required course in multicultural education, so that all of the students who graduate, it doesn't matter what they're going into, vocational courses, academic transfer, whatever, they will be exposed to a multicultural education course.
Something else that you've dealt with today, Cherry, when you were talking with our students, was that the misconceptions that we have about the international economic sphere that we have, or the trade that we have. And would you take just a moment, we don't have much time left, but that students need to know about this too, and also we need to correct those erroneous statements in international trade or ownership in this country by investors from other countries and vice versa.
Well, we have a lot of misconceptions about the world that we live in, and unfortunately one of them has to do with Japan and the role that Japan is playing in our society. Because Japan has increased its share in terms of the ownership of American industry, we have in our minds multiplied that to the point that it's no longer realistic. And I mentioned in my presentation that Fortune magazine did an excellent article in which they interviewed individuals across the country and identified what some of the stereotypes related to Japan were, and then looked at some of those issues and attempted to provide some information that would bring the issues back a little closer to reality, such as ownership. American ownership in the United States, in Japan, is really fairly significant. We have the myth that Japanese are able to buy companies in the United States, but we can't buy companies in Japan. That's not the case.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I wish we had time to get into some of those statistics, but we're out of time. I want to thank you for being on our campus and sharing your thoughts with our viewers across the Northwest.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Cherry McGee Banks, and we've been talking about our program on education and conflict in education and what we need to do in progress. We want to invite you to be with us for week 4 next week, and we'll talk about conflict in religion. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.